Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. This is now my third time coming here, and I want to thank you all so much for the opportunity, especially Judy and Erin and her hardworking team. I'm becoming a turning green junkie, and it's getting progressively more difficult to get here, as you will have noticed, with a little person running around, but I still wouldn't give it up for the world. Part of the reason I'm so excited to be here is talking to the next generation and talking to doers and movers and shakers is what fuels me. I work in a field that's fairly inherently depressing, but I still feel incredibly hopeful, and I want to share a couple of examples of why that is. Hopefully I can figure this out. First example of hope, this is something I'm really excited about. I just got back from this conference in Valparaiso, Chile, a month ago. And it was global leaders from around the world. The president of Chile was there. Richard Branson was there. This was started by Secretary of State John Kerry. I could go on and on and on. It was just an incredible gathering of global leaders. And the top 3 issues on the agenda were acidification and climate change, illegal fishing practices, and plastic pollution. Now, just 10 years ago and even 5 years ago, no one was really talking about this issue. I first learned about plastic pollution in 2001. I was in a lecture very much like you are today, and it was the first I'd heard of this issue, that plastic pollution was gathering in these massive regions of the ocean. The ultimate case of out of sight, out of mind, and very few people were talking about it. Fast forward to 2009, we started our organization to close the global gap. I had learned about plastic in the Pacific Gyre, but was surprised to notice that no one was doing research in the Southern Hemisphere, South Atlantic, South Pacific, and Indian Ocean. So we started this new organization to expand the dialogue to a global level. And part of what I want to leave you with today is that growing up, I just assumed that adults had figured everything out, that most questions have been answered. And I was really surprised to learn that here's this issue that's becoming more of a massive global issue, but there was a huge gap in the research. And sometimes if you want to figure these answers and the answers to these questions out, you just have to do it yourself. So this is especially relevant to people like you who are such incredible leaders. Now I feel a particular sense of urgency with this issue because of this little one who you've now seen running all over the place. Anyone who's ever taken a young person to the beach or out to nature will understand that joy of taking a young person out to discover. Now, I love taking her to the same shorelines that I explored as a kid in Santa Monica, but I wonder how I will explain this to her. This is my local beach. It doesn't look like this every day. This is after the first big rain of the season. But as you look at this picture, it's mostly single-use disposable plastics. And that's the message, part of the message I want to leave you with today. That we've taken this incredibly valuable material designed to last indefinitely and made these products that are designed for short-term use. And this is what the result of that is. Now, you look at this picture and you see plastic trash on a shoreline. Where our inquiries and investigations begin is when this stuff washes out to sea, where most people won't ever see it. Now, it really came to the forefront in the 50s. Plastic has been around for such a short time, and it actually had pretty noble beginnings, figuring out some way of replacing things like ivory for billiard balls and rubber and shellac and all these natural resources. But what happened is that we started replacing a lot of our daily products with this, and especially in the 50s. This was the cover of Life magazine in 1955. And they were pitching plastic as a boon to women's liberation. The text that goes with this photo says, the objects in this picture would take 40 hours to clean, except no housewife ever need bother, you can just throw it all away. Now, we all know what the result of that is around the world. You saw the picture from Santa Monica. This is a river in the Philippines. I'm sure every single person in this room has seen, maybe not something quite so drastic, but at least garbage littering your streets. We all live downstream. We all live upstream from the ocean. Eventually, this stuff will wash out to sea. So once it washes out to sea, it can get swept up in these huge current systems called gyres, which is what we study. And I'm going to show you a quick animation of what happens in the North Pacific, and that'll give you an idea of how our oceans are moving. So this was a current modeling study done by some scientists from NOAA tracking the movement of drifters around the North Pacific Ocean. So as you watch any one of these squares from the West Coast or circles from Japan, you can imagine that's a plastic lighter or a water bottle with a cap on. And what's interesting is with the cap off, that water bottle will sink. So we have literally just scratched the surface of this issue. In terms of what's in the water column and on the ocean floor, big unknown. Lots of questions for you guys to answer. 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 10 years. So a single item from California has traveled to Japan and back in 6 to 10 years. And in 20 years, you can see these patches start to emerge, these concentration zones. And this is what we have referred to as garbage patches. We're not calling it that anymore. We've really turned our oceans into a plastic smog. We've surveyed this entire region, and we've seen that the entire North Pacific Gyre is littered with a fine particulate of plastic pollution. There are 5 of these in the world. We have now surveyed all 5, and I'll tell you in a minute what we have found. But the short version is that this is a global issue, that there's no ocean that's immune from this problem. There's no pristine anymore in our oceans. So you all know plastic is a fossil fuel-based product designed to last indefinitely. What impact does this have on ecosystems as all of this garbage is traveling around these current systems? Devastating impact on wildlife. This is a turtle that we have since actually brought back to Los Angeles. She was found in New Orleans, and my husband's from New Orleans. They cut the ring off this little turtle, and she's now grown in a little bit. They called her Mae West. So we brought Mae West back to Hollywood. And ingestion. So these are the 2 main ways that animals are harmed by plastic pollution. They either mistake it for food and ingest it, or they get entangled in it like that last photo. And the list of marine animals impacted by this grows as the science grows. It's 100% of all sea turtle species today, roughly 50% of all seabird species, and on and on and on. So my first chance seeing this issue firsthand after reading about it and obsessing about it and staying up late thinking about it was to actually go out and see it for myself in 2008. And something else I want to leave you with today is if you're grabbed by an issue, you never know what can happen if you just reach out, send an email, get in touch with someone. In my case, just reaching out to the captain of this boat has changed my life in profound ways. It's really shaped the course of my life's work. In many ways, because also on this trip, in addition to seeing firsthand the issue of plastic pollution, the man on the far left, Dr. Marcus Erickson, proposed on that trip with a little piece of garbage. And the product of that is running around. But what we saw was pretty devastating. Every single sample that we collected on the surface of the ocean looked like this slurry of marine life mixed with microplastic particles. At night, we saw the food chain implications. We collected 660 of these small myctophid fish and found roughly a third of them had plastics in their guts, along with the plankton that they should be eating. We also did a project in 2008 where we built a boat out of plastic bottles. Marcus sailed it across the Pacific, fished out this fish, was going to eat it, cut it open, and found 17 pieces of plastic inside the stomach of this fish. He didn't eat that one. And that's because of what we know about the way plastic behaves in the ocean and in the environment in general. Every single piece of plastic has the ability to absorb pollutants. You've heard a lot about toxic chemicals today. Some of these pollutants, POPs we call them, persistent organic pollutants, will stick to the surface of plastic at very high concentrations. We are at the top of that food chain. So it's down to the nanoparticles. There's now new science showing nanoparticles of plastic in the circulatory system of clams and mussels inside the guts of plankton and even detected in the human lung. How synthetic are we as a result of this? In 2009, before having a baby, I did what's called a body burden test to look at the chemicals in my own body, finding trace levels of all 4 contaminants we were looking for: PCBs, DDT, PFCs, and PBDEs, which are flame retardants. All 4 of them were present in my blood serum. The flame retardants were much higher. I'm from California. And what we know about these chemicals that are now endocrine disruptors is that these will pass to the next generation through childbirth and through breastfeeding. Now, she's incredibly healthy and wonderful, and I feel so blessed, but what is the legacy we're leaving to the next generation as a result of this toxic soup that we're flooding our societies with? So all of these experiences were our inspiration to start a new organization called 5 Gyres to research all 5 of those current systems and try and leverage the science to drive solutions. And now I'm getting to the hopeful part. You'll recognize someone there on the far left. That's Brett, Eco-Hero. You're going to hear more from him today. And what we do with these expeditions is we bring the public on board. The first few expeditions we did when we were super, super scrappy, it was, how are we going to pay for this? Let's get people to come on board and help us cover the cost of the charter. But then we quickly realized it was a chance to engage people directly, to build ambassadors. And we have a couple in this very room with Brett and Cara Lee, to bring people to see this issue firsthand, participate with us to actually do the science, and then go back to their communities and be ambassadors for change. So this has been an incredible model for us. And I want to just show you an average sample. Now we've done over 60,000 miles, I think, of ocean. We collect sample after sample that looks like this. We've only had 4 samples come up clean, 2 off the coast of Chile and a couple in Iceland. So when we combine all of our data together and look at what is the full global estimate for plastic pollution in the world's oceans, our data plus 7 other scientists from around the world, we came up with this number. 270,000 tons from 5.25 trillion particles. And what's so interesting about that is that it's mostly broken down particles, mostly the size of a grain of rice, like in that photo you saw before. So we cannot clean this issue up in the oceans. We have to go upstream. And that starts with better design, better corporate responsibility, better policies, and engaged citizens. And that's where you all come into play. So I'm going to share an example of something that I'm really excited about, and the metaphor for me is that we can actually drive major corporate change, all of us in this room. We've mostly done ocean research, but in 2012 we ventured into the Great Lakes, testing a theory that to really engage people on coastal issues, if they don't live on a coast, you got to connect with their local watershed, and that can be a lake, river, or stream. What we found in the Great Lakes was shocking to us. We pulled up one sample in Lake Erie that had more plastic by count than any ocean we had sampled anywhere in the world. And as we looked at that photo and we looked at these tiny little plastic spheres that were uniform in size and shape, we were baffled until we went to Rite Aid. You've probably heard about this by now. Microbeads, exfoliants, they're in our body washes, they're in our facial scrubs, they're even in toothpaste, which is just crazy to me that we would put plastic in something that people are putting in their mouth. Actually, dentists came out and really helped us with this because they reported finding plastic microbeads in people's gums. But it was what we were able to do with this that's really the hopeful story for me. We published the science, and it's really important to have sound science as you're driving policy. We took it directly to the big guys, to Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, and the first response was, more research needed. That's kind of always the party line. You need more research. But then we got our community, people like you involved in writing letters. And Johnson & Johnson was the first after Unilever to come around and say, okay, we'll phase them out. But we are a tiny, tiny NGO compared to these massive multinational companies. So we decided to take it a step further and draft legislation, which we introduced in 2014. We came devastatingly close. We introduced this bill for the first time in California and New York, and we fell short 1 vote on the Senate floor. But the power of coalition building and community support, this is just to show you in case you guys aren't using these products anyway, but if you want to show your friends and family, you look on the ingredients. If you see anything, first of all, if you can't read it, it's probably a good indication that you shouldn't be putting it on your body. But if you see a polyethylene, polypropylene, that's plastic. So 2015, with a bunch of NGOs working together, we were able to create a national movement. There are now 8 states across the country that have passed bills to ban the sale of products that contain microbeads. And just a month ago in California, we passed the strongest bill, and it's now signed into law. So that's really exciting. However, the phase-out time is 2020. So our work is far from over here, and this is really what I want to leave you with in terms of action today. Students leading change across the country. We worked with students at UCLA to do a project to ban beads from their student store, and it was really effective, and we're trying to scale that. So we're going to be launching a campaign in the new year, kind of an out with the old, in with the new, to get people to send their products back, kind of a little guerrilla disruptor style. But every time I talk to people about this, they say, well, what do we do with the products we already have? So we're going to launch a campaign to have people send them back to Procter & Gamble and Johnson & Johnson with a respectful note that urges design change. And we're also going to try and engage more college students in doing this sort of thing. Get them out of our student stores, put pressure on retailers and say 2020 is too late. We cannot wait. We need these out now. And we're talking about trillions upon trillions of tiny little fish food size particles that are currently on the shelf, and it's such an easy thing to get them off the shelf. And finally, really just the metaphor again for me is that the public sector can drive corporate change. So I have a short film, but I think I'm going to skip it. I'll send it to you guys if you're interested, and just would love for you to sign up and take action here and be looking for ways to get involved in the new year. Thank you so much, and I'm so inspired by this group.